Because it is about figures, big figures as well, and suggestions from Rishi Sunak that a lot of the figures behind the scenes are even more eye-watering than what's out in public at the moment.
They are, I must say. I mean, this is just an open goal for Andy Burnham, the self-styled King of the North, of course, former Labour cabinet minister, became mayor of Manchester, and he's been banging on about HS2 literally for years and warning, as many people have. Look, it's not a great scheme, but if it only goes London to Birmingham, it's a completely pointless scheme, because we've already got 2 train lines from London to Birmingham. And let's have a look at some of the costs. Back in 2010, when HS2 was first conceived, it was 30 billion, and that was London to Birmingham, then Birmingham to Manchester and Birmingham to Leeds. It went up to 56 billion by 2015, 80 billion by 2016. Now it's up at 107 billion. That's for London to Birmingham and Birmingham to Manchester. That's an estimate from Michael Byng, who's consulted with HS2 and Network Rail over many years, a very respected person. And these are absolutely huge sums. Look, this is going to be the most expensive railway ever built, right? This is also Europe's largest construction project. So it's really big stuff, and the world is watching. And if we end up, after all the arguments and all the rows and all the lack of cost control, not with the whole scheme, but just London to Birmingham, that really is the worst of all possible outcomes. And what timing for the government.
Yeah.
Did someone leak this? They're literally going to hold their conference in the centre of Manchester, near to a disused railway station. And there's a train strike going on when we're trying to all get up there, and when we're coming back.
You can't make it up, can you? I mean, Andy Burnham says that in that interview to Chris Hope. He says they surely can't be coming north to tell us they are going to cancel it. That is a pack of lies. And is that a possibility when you look at that graph and you see that cost almost triple the estimate at the beginning of all of this, over 100 billion, is it at this point?
100 billion.
Yeah. I mean, can the government really and truly turn their back on this, or will they have to offer an alternative?
Well, look, the cost estimates of HS2 were deliberately underestimated, in my view, back in the day, in order to ram this thing through Parliament. A lot of big engineering interests, a lot of big property interests were ramming this through, when lots of us were saying, and people within the rail industry were saying, look, we like trains, but this is not the right thing to do. Britain's too small. The distances are too small to bother to have high-speed rail. Our rail routes are too twisty, because they have to be straight lines for high-speed rail.
Yeah, and there's got to be lots of cuttings and tunnels.
Yeah, and we already
have
2 train lines from London to Birmingham. Does it really matter to take 20 minutes off London to Birmingham? No.
Let's just remind people of what they were trying to do in terms of linking from Euston originally all the way up. I mean, first of all, Leeds went, and now, Old Oak Common is suddenly going to become London Central. But, I mean, Paul Johnson, the head of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, said, look, this should never have been built at all. But now that they're building or have built most of the section up to Birmingham, it makes sense maybe to bite the bullet and carry on.
So let's just look at the map. London to Birmingham was phase 1, right? From Euston, central London to Birmingham. Phase 2A was Birmingham through Crewe to Manchester, going west. And then phase 2B was Birmingham through East Midlands hub up to Leeds. In Yorkshire, of course. Now, 2B, to the Leeds branch, was scrapped back in 2021. And we also know now that there's a danger that the London Gateway, huge amounts of work going on at Euston, it's just up the road, isn't it? That's been stopped. And it may be that HS2 comes into Old Oak Common. Now, that name won't mean anything to non-Londoners, but that's basically Acton, right, which is a suburb in Zone 3 or 4. This is not central London. So if you get on HS2 in Birmingham, you come off at Old Oak Common, then you get on the tube to go to Euston. That takes longer than the existing railway from Birmingham to Euston. So the cost, all this cost, no time saving. And what are the point of time saving when you can anyway work on the train, when you've got decent Wi-Fi on the train?
I mean, on that point, on the planning, I mean, questions are going to be asked now about why these plans weren't even put into motion at the very, very beginning. I mean, we're talking about Old Oak Common now in Zone 3 of London. In Birmingham, Curzon Street is about a 15-minute walk from New Street.
You're not even coming into Birmingham New Street, are you?
No, exactly.
And I know
Curzon Street.
It's the site of an old post office rail terminal. I've filmed there in the past. I've made many documentaries about this high-speed super train. But it strikes me that just the fundamental case hasn't really been thought through. And again, I'm citing many, many people in the rail industry, because international studies show that if you have high-speed rail, it tends to draw business to the capital rather than out to the regions. So, you know, Sutton Coalfield is going to become, in South Birmingham, of course, is going to become a commuter suburb of London, provided that the people in London work near Old Oak Common in Acton. So it seems completely ill-conceived, and you know, the government's opponents are going to have a lot of fun with this, because Rishi Sunak wants to say, look, I am the only politician who's got the guts to stop this, but people are going to say, but your lot have been in power since 2010.
And there's a huge problem there, because it's not just in opposition, it's within the Tory party now. And we've got William Hague basically saying terribly badly managed, a national disgrace. George Osborne and Lord Heseltine scrapping the Manchester route will be an act of gross vandalism. Patrick McLaughlin, former Tory Transport Secretary, scaling back is completely wrong. I mean, they're all over the shop on this, aren't they?
They are, but this is what happens when, in my view, you instigate infrastructure projects that have never really been thought through. Look, we spent about 25 or 30 billion quid so far on this high-speed super train. What could you have done for 30 billion pounds to the rail network in the north? You could have upgraded the Transpennine route, linking Liverpool with Newcastle and Middlesbrough, as should have happened years ago.
East to west.
Yeah, taking in Leeds, taking in Sheffield, taking in Manchester. Great northern cities. There are very few cities in the world of their size that have the global name recognition that they have, that have, you know, many, many really top-class universities, relatively cheap housing for young people.
How quickly could they put that into action if Rishi Sunak at the party conference gets the message, you've got to do something
The thing about the
this?
Transpennine route, it's already an existing route. It's a question of upgrading an existing route, the rolling stock on which and the lines on which. I mean, some of them, it's magnificent. You get these incredible, you know, viaducts with trains in the north of England. Absolutely, you know, Q Elgar.
Victorian engineering.
Absolutely wonderful Victorian engineering. And yet there are many pinch points on that Transpennine route that need to be solved. As I've said, Mark, there are many other pinch points across the network, particularly in the north, that could be fixed with single-digit billions. An example I'll say again, because a lot of people will be talking about it next week, is this pinch point in the centre of Manchester, near Dean Street Station, a place I know well. It's called the Castlefield Corridor. Now, this pinch point, the whole network goes down to one line in either direction. It impacts trains right the way up the northwest, all the way up to Scotland.
A domino effect.
And the Department for Transport has promised money to unblock the Castlefield Corridor many, 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 many times, and it's never materialised. And I hate to say this, Ofcom regulated person here, if I was Andy Burnham, I'd also be upset.
What do you think this will mean for the Tories at the next general election? Because they've promised that they still stand by levelling up, but then you've got rhetoric from Andy Burnham there, who says, well, people in Manchester, they're second-class citizens. They've been asked to choose between the Transpennine route or HS2. People in London don't get asked
We just had Crossrail, right? We just had 25 billion quid on Crossrail.
Got the Elizabeth line.
Going across London.
That sort of rhetoric is going to feed into Red Wall voters who voted for levelling up. They want to see levelling up in action. So if the northern leg of HS2 is scrapped, how's that going to affect
Now, that's the kind of headline banner claim. This is levelling up. But you know what? A lot of people who live across the Red Wall, they don't like HS2 because it zooms past their town. you know, talks to people in Burnley or Barnsley or Blackburn or Bradford, all the bees, about what HS2 does for them. Absolutely nothing. In my experience, I've conducted opinion polls, made films a lot about train services in the north of England. It's a bit of a hobby horse of mine. The polls constantly show that people in the north don't want HS2. You know, obviously Andy Burnham is going to try and make political capital out of it. What they want is better links into and between our northern cities for commuters to ease the massive dependence in the north on cars. They want frequency of services. And that means electrifying train services in the north, many of which are still diesel. Slow diesel trains, you can't get many carriages on them, they can't accelerate, very infrequent, very, very crowded.